Every time you stay silent, thinking it's the mature thing to do, you're actually fading. You tell yourself it's wisdom, it's peace, it's being the bigger person. But in truth, you're slowly erasing yourself. Not all at once, but piece by piece, like a soul suffocating beneath its own skin. There's a kind of exhaustion nobody talks about, not the kind that makes your shoulders slump or your back ache. It's in the way your laugh sounds just a little too forced. It's in the way your voice wavers even when you're saying, "I'm fine." It's the fatigue that comes from never speaking your truth, from biting your tongue so often you've forgotten how your real voice sounds. You've convinced yourself that avoiding conflict is strength, that choosing peace means you're calm, enlightened, composed. But when night falls and the world quiets, what you feel isn't peace, it's bitterness. It's the cold, dull ache of everything you never said. It's the silent scream of your real self, buried alive under the weight of being good. Nature didn't applaud your silence. He didn't romanticize your compliance. He didn't call your quiet suffering noble. He saw it for what it is: enslavement dressed in morality, praised by culture, but still a cage. You think you're keeping the peace. But what if, every time you bite your tongue, you're actually building a coffin for your own voice? Every polite smile becomes another nail. Every nod becomes another shovelful of dirt. This video isn't here to comfort you. It's not for people who want to keep pretending. It's for those who are exhausted by their own vanishing act. For those sick of being the mature one in a world that only values them when they're silent, obedient, and useful. What you'll hear in the next few chapters won't be affirmations. They won't be pretty. What you'll get is a mirror, sharp, unforgiving, reflecting nature's truth and your own silent rage. Are you ready to look at what most people spend their whole lives avoiding? If you are, then stay. Because after this, you might finally meet yourself. And once you do, you won't be able to go back to pretending. You say you're choosing silence. But what if silence is choosing you? What if the values you hold, obedience, humility, restraint, were never really yours to begin with? From the moment you learned to speak, you were taught to shrink, told that kindness meant obedience, that love meant endurance, that being a good person meant keeping your head down. So, you adapted. You became who they wanted. You smiled when dismissed. You stayed when you should have walked. And you told yourself it was peace. But let's be real. It wasn't peace. It was submission. Nature saw it clearly. He gave it a name: slave morality. A moral code built not on strength, but on survival. A mindset born from generations who couldn't fight back, so they rewrote the rules. They turned pride into sin, turned submission into a virtue, made fear look like humility, and silence feel like wisdom. Not because they believed it, but because it was the only way they could live. Over time, that survival mechanism became tradition, then culture, and eventually, your identity. You've heard it your whole life. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make a scene. Don't argue. Just be good. But stop and ask yourself, what does good even mean? And who decided? Because here's the truth. What you've been calling maturity might just be fear. What you've been calling harmony might actually be paralysis. You've been trained to flinch, to freeze, to fold. Not because it's right, but because it's rewarded. You're not naturally weak. You were taught to be. Taught that raising your voice is aggressive, that drawing boundaries is selfish, that saying no is cruel. So now, even when you're burning inside, you smile. Even when someone crosses a line, you stay silent. And the world sees that and takes more. Because how you let people treat you teaches them how to continue treating you. Nature never wrote a script for the tame. He wrote for the parts of you that you buried, the part that's been quiet for too long, the part that still aches to be free, the self buried under politeness, the self sacrificed for acceptance, the self that's been locked behind obligation. And he dares to ask, what if your goodness is just fear in disguise? What if your silence isn't turning the other cheek, but turning away from your own power? The chains around your soul were forged with nice words, moral words, cultural praise. But make no mistake, they're still chains. And if you don't learn to break them, you'll spend your entire life being rewarded for dying quietly. If anything you're hearing resonates, if you've ever felt trapped in the prison of your own silence, this is the moment to pause. Like this video if it speaks to you. Share it with someone still carrying invisible chains. Subscribe and join us on this journey, not toward comfort, but toward truth, toward fire, toward freedom. Because the only way out is through. There's a fire inside you, but it doesn't rage, it waits. It simmers, quiet and restrained. It doesn't explode. It ferments, like smoke trapped beneath your ribs. You call it stress, you call it fatigue. But nature had another name, resentment. It's not just exhaustion, it's moral decay, the kind that happens when you betray yourself too often. Every time you stay quiet when your soul begs to speak. Every time you nod when your gut screams no. Every time you let them cross the line again, thinking you're being virtuous, that fire grows. And here's the most dangerous part. You pretend it's a strength. You say, I'm being the bigger person, I'm letting it go. But you didn't let it go. You swallowed it. And now, it's living inside you as tension, as resentment, as a quiet, seething fire. You're not at peace. You've just become fluent in suppression. The resentful don't erupt, they rot. They rehearse arguments in their heads for weeks. They smile in public, bleed in private. They call it forgiveness, but it's fear. Fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of finally saying enough. And here's the poison. The longer you stay silent, the more you convince yourself it's noble, that it's the high road. But that's not virtue, it's avoidance. Because real peace demands real boundaries. Real love demands real honesty. And you've replaced both with performance. That's what resentment is. Truth locked in a cage, fire under glass. And the longer it stays trapped, the more it shapes you. You start to believe you're the martyr, the one who always gives, the one who never gets. And you wear that pain like a badge. But nature doesn't pity you, he challenges you. Because the resentful person isn't just a victim, they're an accomplice in their own disappearance. Every time you avoid the fight, you feed the fire. And every time you feed the fire, you lose a little more of yourself. So stop pretending that your silence is noble. Stop calling fear maturity. Stop mistaking suppression for strength. You don't need to explode. You don't need to lash out. But you do need to act. Because resentment that's never dealt with doesn't make you righteous. It makes you invisible. They didn't teach you to be strong. They taught you to be nice, polite, manageable, quiet. And every time your voice rose, every time your will surfaced, they flinched. Not because you were wrong, but because you were becoming something they couldn't control. So they gave your fire new names: aggressive, selfish, arrogant. And you believed them. You shrank. You softened your edges. You silenced your instincts. You made yourself smaller and called it goodness. But nature, he didn't see danger in your defiance. He saw power, raw, beautiful power. He called it the will to power. Not power over others, not domination, but the primal force of life itself. It's the seed breaking through stone. It's the wave that reshapes the shore. It's the soul that refuses to die quietly. Everything alive wants to grow, to expand, to assert itself, and so do you. But they taught you to fear that drive, to label self-expression as ego, to treat ambition as vanity, to see boundaries as cruelty. So you chose the safer path. You endured, you complied, you stayed quiet. But that will to power, it didn't die. It turned inward. It became anxiety, exhaustion, bitterness, shame. Because that fire inside you was never meant to be contained. It was meant to move, to rise, to reshape everything it touches. True power doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from reclaiming control over yourself. It sounds like this. This is what I want. This is what I need. This is where I begin and where you end. But that kind of clarity comes with a cost. You'll be misunderstood. You'll be called selfish, too loud, too much. Let them say it. Because those words, they're the sound of your cage cracking. The will to power isn't about domination. It's about alignment. Choosing truth over comfort. Depth over approval. Selfhood over survival. And it doesn't start with grand gestures. It starts with small sacred acts. When you say no, when you tell the truth, when you stand your ground without apology. Because every honest moment, every boundary you draw is a rebellion, a resurrection. You weren't born to submit, you were born to become. And to become, you have to stop waiting for permission to be whole. You've been carrying burdens that weren't yours, smiling through suffocation, bending your back under expectations you never agreed to. And they called it strength. They said, "You're so responsible, so mature, so easygoing." But Nietzsche knew better. He saw the difference between strength and submission. He described it as the evolution of the spirit. 3 stages. The first, the camel. The camel kneels. It lowers its head and says, "Give me your burdens. I'll carry them all." It endures. It obeys. It suffers in silence. It confuses pain with purpose. You've lived this stage. Every time you said yes when your body screamed no. Every time you accepted someone else's weight and called it love. But then something changes. The camel's knees begin to bleed. Its back starts to break. And a question rises from deep within. Why am I still carrying all this? That's when the second transformation begins. The camel becomes the lion. The lion doesn't kneel. It rises. It roars. A sacred number. No to imposed morality. No to inherited duty. No to the illusion of virtue through silence. But the lion doesn't fight for the sake of destruction. It fights to protect, to reclaim space, to defend the right to exist without permission. And yet, even the lion has a foe, a dragon, glittering, terrifying. Each scale etched with a single commandment. Thou shalt be polite. Thou shalt not disobey. Thou shalt not disappoint. Thou shalt avoid conflict. Thou shalt stay small. The lion must face that dragon, not with claws, but with fire. The fire of truth, the fire of defiance, the fire of becoming. And if the lion wins, if it burns through those ancient rules, something extraordinary happens. The final transformation begins. The child. The child isn't naive. It's reborn, unburdened, unchained. It doesn't obey. It chooses. It doesn't react. It creates. The child doesn't carry the old world. It invents a new one. From the inside out. Light, joyful, wild, free. This is the journey nature mapped out. From the beast of burden, to the roar of rebellion, to the dance of creation. It's not a metaphor, it's a path, a spiritual evolution. And you're already walking it. If you've ever felt crushed by roles you didn't choose, you've lived as the camel. If you've ever roared back, fought for your space, set a boundary, you're becoming the lion. But one day you'll have to go further, because rebellion isn't the destination. Creation is. So ask yourself, when was the last time you were truly yourself? Not the version they approved of, not the one that earned applause, not the one you polished just to survive, but the raw one, the one that breathes fire, the one that doesn't disappear when the room gets uncomfortable. For most people, that version hasn't existed in years, maybe never, because long before you formed your own beliefs, you were trained how to behave, how to be agreeable, acceptable, safe. So you learned the script, you performed, you smiled on cue, bit your tongue when it mattered most, and called it maturity. But nature wasn't fooled. He said, becoming who you are isn't a discovery, it's a rebellion. A war against the roles you were handed, against the silent betrayals you made to be included. Most people don't live lives, they perform them. Masks wrapped in politeness, scripts written in fear. And the mask, it works. It gets you praise, keeps you conflict-free, wins you affection. Not real love, but the kind that depends on you staying agreeable. And eventually, you forget it's a mask. You say, this is just who I am. But nature asks, who told you that? Whose voice is that in your head? And who benefits from your smallness? To become who you truly are, you have to burn the script, break the role, walk away from the character that everyone loved, but you never believed in. And yes, it's terrifying. Because when the mask falls, you're exposed. No more applause, no more buffer. Just you. And the question, who am I when I stop performing? That's when the real work begins. Because the pain you feel when the mask dissolves, it's not weakness, it's withdrawal. You've been addicted to acceptance, to being liked, to making others comfortable at the cost of your own truth. But now you know, and you can't unknow it. So the next time you smile, ask yourself, is this smile coming from freedom or fear? The next time you agree, ask, am I speaking or surviving? Because the price of being liked should never be your own disappearance. Nietzsche never promised you'd be liked. He promised you'd be real. And for once, that's enough. Because when you stop pretending, even if your voice trembles, even if you're standing alone, you're not performing life anymore. You're finally living it. They told you silence is strength, that letting go makes you wise, that walking away is the high road. But nature saw through that illusion. What he saw wasn't peace, it was paralysis. Silence doesn't make you good, it makes you complicit. So let me ask you, how many times have you swallowed your truth just to keep the peace? How many times have you let disrespect slide because calling it out felt too messy, too uncomfortable? You told yourself, it's not worth it. But it was. It always was. It was your dignity. It was your boundary. It was your soul. Every time you bit your tongue, you didn't just protect the moment. You protected the system that thrives on your silence, the manipulator, the abuser, the one who banks on you not speaking up. And they noticed. They saw that you wouldn't push back, and they pushed again. Harder. Until one day, you wake up and barely recognize yourself. Because what you've been calling maturity isn't harmony, it's self-erasure in slow motion. You smile when your heart aches. You agree when your soul is screaming no. You call it peace, but nature would call it something else, the degeneration of the soul. Not because you're weak, but because you were trained to believe that being good means obedience, that kindness means self-denial, that silence is noble. But silence has a cost, and you've been paying it with every unspoken boundary, every buried emotion, every fake yes that should have been a thunderous no. You think your silence protects you, but it actually exposes you to manipulation, to exploitation, to a life that applauds your vanishing act. Make no mistake, the world notices. Even if you pretend not to, people can feel when you're afraid to speak, and some will use that. Because every time you don't own your space, someone else fills it with their will, their agenda, their rules. So ask yourself, do you want to be respected or liked? Do you want to be visible or just agreeable? Do you want to live or survive so quietly that one day there's nothing left? Nature reminds us, you are not good if your goodness demands your silence. You are not kind if your kindness requires your disappearance. So be honest. Are you silent because you're wise or because you're scared? And if the answer is fear, let it sting, let it burn. Because that burn is truth trying to wake you up. You think you find yourself in silence, in solitude, in stillness. But Nietzsche knew better. You don't find yourself in peace. You find yourself in fire. You meet yourself when someone challenges you, when your voice shakes, but you speak anyway. When your truth threatens the room, but you say it anyway. Because conflict isn't destruction, it's revelation. It shows you what you value, what you believe, what you're willing to defend. Without conflict, you remain untested, undefined, unshaped. You might think you're kind until someone crosses a line. Then you find out, are you kind or just afraid? You might think you're patient until you're disrespected. Then you know, is it patience or is it paralysis? It's easy to look virtuous when no one pushes you. It's easy to seem composed when your boundaries are never tested. But real character is forged in friction. That's what nature understood. Only through conflict do you meet the self beneath the performance. Not the one who smiles to survive. The one who draws the line. The one who says, I know who I am, and I will not disappear just to make you comfortable. But here's the tragedy. Most people never go there. They avoid the argument. They swallow the truth. They call it maturity. They say they're rising above. But they're not rising. They're retreating. They're just postponing the inevitable collapse. Because a self that's never been tested isn't strong, it's hollow. And when life finally puts pressure on it, it cracks. So if you've been avoiding conflict just to hold yourself together, hear this clearly. You're not avoiding pain. You're avoiding truth. And yes, truth causes tension. But tension isn't bad. It's a birth canal. It's the sound of something real being born. So ask yourself, when was the last time you let the conflict happen? When was the last time you let the illusion shatter? Let someone walk away because you finally chose yourself. That moment hurts, but it clarifies everything. Conflict isn't the enemy, it's the arena. And you've been sitting on the bench long enough. It's time to step in. Because the longer you run from the fire, the less of yourself remains. Nature didn't call you to peace. He called you to wholeness. And wholeness doesn't live in retreat. It's forged in the heat of truth. Let's be honest, most people will never become who they truly are. Not because they can't, but because they won't. Because becoming who you are, it hurts. More than playing safe. More than pretending. More than living a lie that gets you applause. Because once you start waking up, you begin to see it. The fake smile, the filtered opinions, the careful edits you make just to be palatable. You start realizing how much of your life wasn't built for you. It was built for them. The job, the relationship, the beliefs you defend but never examined, the boundaries you never set because you didn't want to make waves. And that realization, it's brutal. It's the death of who you thought you were and the beginning of someone you haven't met yet. Nietzsche was clear. This isn't a spiritual awakening. It's a funeral, a burning, a collapse, a purging of everything false. And now you have to choose. Keep the mask, stay comfortable, remain predictably agreeable, or rip it off and risk everything. Your image, your safety, your circle, even your own identity. Because once the mask falls, you will lose people. Guaranteed. The ones who only loved the version of you that stayed quiet, that always said yes, that never said, "This is not okay." Let them leave. They were never with you. They were with the costume. And yes, you'll feel alone. Because authenticity is a narrow road. But what you gain is sacred. A self that no longer shrinks, no longer fakes, no longer waits for permission to exist. Most people will keep the mask because it's lighter. It keeps them welcome in every room. It keeps everyone else comfortable. But the truth is, you weren't born to make others comfortable. You were born to stop betraying yourself. And the pain of becoming, it's real, it's sharp, it burns. But it's the only kind of pain that leads to resurrection. Everything else is just slow suffocation. So grieve what you must. Let the illusions fall. Let the false roles die. Because once they're gone, you'll finally have space. Space for something true. And from that space, you can build a life that doesn't suffocate your soul. Nietzsche didn't write for the crowd. He wrote for the exile. For the one who knows. To become real, you must first stand alone. This is the point where most people turn back. They've heard the truth, felt the fire, seen the mask slip. For a fleeting moment, they even glimpsed who they really are. But then, it's time to act, to speak the truth, to draw the line, to walk away from the role they've played for years. And they freeze, because comfort is seductive. It whispers, "Don't ruin this." It's not that bad. Stay where it's safe. And that's how the false self survives. Another day, another year, another life unlived. Nature had a name for this moment. The test of becoming. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, it's internal. A war fought in the privacy of your own mind. It's the decision to finally say the thing you've always silenced. To enter the room, not as the version they tolerate, but as the real you. To risk being alone so you can stop being fake. And yes, it's terrifying, because you know exactly what you'll lose. The approval, the image, the safety that came from playing small. But what you gain? Everything. You gain your voice. You gain your spine. You gain your sovereignty. You gain a life that doesn't require your disappearance to function. But to get there, you must break. Not bend, not negotiate, not delay. Break. Break with the persona, with the mask, with the agreements you never made but still obeyed. And that break, it's painful. It's the pain of cutting ties with the version of yourself who made everyone else comfortable but made you miserable. It's the pain of stepping out of the performance and into your real name. And yes, they'll call you cold. They'll call you selfish. They'll call you difficult. Let them. Because they're speaking to someone who no longer exists. They're reacting to the version of you who smiled through the betrayal, who stayed quiet for the sake of harmony, who bent until they broke. That version is gone. The truth is, you were always too much for the cage they built around you. And now you're done. Done dimming your fire just so others can feel warm. So ask yourself, are you willing to lose their comfort, to find your core? Are you willing to say no, even if your voice shakes? Are you willing to be disliked, to finally be real? Because this is the final break. And once it happens, there's no going back. But there is going forward, into clarity, into integrity, into the quiet, unshakable power of a soul that no longer apologizes for existing. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of something you've never had while wearing the mask, a life that is truly yours. So now what? You've heard enough. Now it's your turn to choose. Not comfort, not applause, not belonging. Choose truth. Because the cost of silence isn't just missed opportunities, it's missed identity, missed freedom, missed life. You've been taught to nod, to smile, to shrink, and they called it grace. But now you know that smile, it was survival. That silence, it was self-betrayal. That pleasing everyone, it was your slowest form of death. And now, you get to stop. Stop apologizing for your depth, for your standards, for your pain, for your number. Say no to roles that shrink you, to love that erases you, to systems that reward obedience but punish authenticity. Say no, and let that no be the first time you breathe. Nature didn't ask you to be liked. He asked you to be real, to look in the mirror, no mask, no filter, no apology, and say, "This is who I am." Unfiltered, unpolished, undeniable. And if the world calls you cold, so be it. You weren't born to warm the room by setting yourself on fire. You were born to stand, to burn clean, to speak. And if your voice shakes, let it. Because every truth begins in trembling. Let them leave. Let the roles collapse. Let the silence end. You were never born to be agreeable. You were born to be awake. So wake up, take the mask off, and don't put it back on. Because once you become who you truly are, you'll never settle for anything less ever again. You'll never trade your voice for their approval. You'll never betray yourself for their comfort. You'll never call fear maturity or silence wisdom again. You'll live fully, honestly, loudly. You'll become the fire, not the one that destroys, but the one that illuminates. You'll carry a truth so bright, it makes masks uncomfortable. So loud, it makes silence impossible. So fierce, it makes retreat unthinkable. And that truth, it's not just yours, it's a beacon. For every person still nodding when they want to scream. Still staying when their soul says go. Still pretending that being liked is worth being lost. Your becoming isn't just personal, it's contagious. Because when one person chooses to live fully, it gives everyone around them permission to do the same. So yes, you'll lose some people, but you'll also find your people. The ones who don't flinch at your fire, the ones who don't ask you to shrink, the ones who don't just tolerate the real you, they celebrate them. That's what waits on the other side of this fire. Not comfort, but freedom. Not applause, but truth. Not the performance of peace, but the presence of wholeness. So if you've ever felt like your silence was killing you, this is your sign to speak. If you've ever felt like your smile was a mask, this is your permission to drop it. If you've ever wondered who you might be, if you stopped pleasing everyone else, this is your invitation to find out. And the only way forward is through. So take the first step. Say the real thing. Draw the real line. Live the real life. Because the world doesn't need more agreeable people. It needs more awake ones. And you've been waking up this whole time. Now it's time to rise.